platform we're generously using today. They hold regular educational events like this just for their own clients. And Copyright Clearance Center, which clears rights and permissions at scale for the entire industry. The help of those sponsors means that, as you know, we're also able to provide today's webinar to you for free. As my Publishers Launch partner, Mike Shatzkin, wrote on his blog earlier this week, some of the industry's biggest strategic thinkers believe that cloud-based services will have a transformative effect on how publishers large and small operate on a day-to-day basis. As promised, today's session is really meant as an introduction to the subject, setting up our full-day event later this month, and additional explorations of this topic will be undertaking for some time to come. In that sense, this is really our first completely technology-focused series of events. But as usual, we're particularly focused on how trade publishing executives can understand and deploy the available technology rather than looking at the technology by itself. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Mike Shatzkin, the host of today's event.
Thanks very much, Michael. We're doing a conference on July 26th on cloud solutions, that is, hosted solutions, because we see it as the next wave of publishing technology. And we're delighted to have some of the participants in that conference here today to get us started thinking about that subject. Our first guest today is Ken Michaels, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Hachette. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Michael.
Good to hear you. You were part of getting us started exploring cloud services in publishing. I know you see this from both your position as COO of Hachette and as chair of Book Industry Study Group. Why do you think it is such an important subject?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let me start by saying it's not hard to see that the pace of change is dizzying, not just in publishing, but across all media companies. Linking back to the original concepts of Moore's Law, we see processor speed, memory capacity, web access performance, and bandwidth, and things like video and image quality are all improving at exponential rates. These improvement trends are the fundamental driving forces behind the industry's digital and social engagement transformation. However, there is a downside to all this, and that is that all these improvements can be significant enough to rapidly render predecessor technology solutions and services obsolete. So let me answer your question first from the co-chair role of BISG's perspective. The mission of the Book Industry Study Group is simple. It's where all the players of the publishing ecosystem come together to solve the problems or ID opportunities within the industry through sharing, research, best practices, education, and yes, even the development of standards as needed. To be in the publishing industry and not be involved in BISG is just crazy in my opinion. As it is here where much of the friction of the industry is defined and acted upon among thought leaders. And one of our largest issues is this very issue of the industry not keeping pace with technology capabilities. So things like legacy systems in some participants not being able to structure or share metadata properly, data not warehoused or maintained efficiently or consistently, industry reporting and rights transparency issues, education and awareness of the new technologies are all issues that the industry is wrestling with. Cloud services represents an opportunity for the industry and players to embrace solutions to not just catch up, but to meet the evolving needs of the supply chain we live in, quickly eliminating the obsolescence that fragments the processes in our industry. As to the Hachette perspective, we are blessed in a chairman like David Young and a parent company run by Arno Nuri, who understands that future competitiveness demands an innovative culture that listens and invests. As a COO, the challenge is how to apply that innovation and do so both efficiently and effectively. For efficiency, the virtualization of hardware that the cloud represents brings real bottom line savings, flexibility, scale, and speed all at once, which is why Hachette converted 2 years ago every single piece of our system's hardware to our cloud infrastructure. As to effectiveness, it's all about the software that enables our services, our workflows, and our solutions. And yes, sometimes this software is not just for progressive companies to use, but to offer others as a service opportunity. So when you hear the term cloud services today or at the conference, understand that the cloud is the infrastructure and the services is the software. Today, the speed of setup and interoperability of workflow and information is getting so much easier that a company can no longer has to build everything in-house. Your agility will actually improve when you can find world-class providers in those areas that you identify as not your core competency. Additionally, this SaaS model allows you to hold them accountable to service standards you normally wouldn't try to implement internally. And you retain the ability to replace the provider quickly if they don't keep investing and improving with the pace of change. I think it's a great solution for modern business.
Tell us about specifically some of the hosted services that Hachette has signed up and why you chose the route of doing this in those cases as opposed to developing a proprietary solution.
Yeah, that's a good question. First, it's important to note that hosted services are not new. I would venture to say that no one on this web actually uses an in-house email solution, for example, and that their HR systems also is not something anyone builds or tries to host in-house for the most part. So hosted services actually represents a mature space that publishing has not yet fully optimized. For Hachette, I can give you two quick examples of what we identified as being outside of our core competencies that we felt we should not invest and build for ourselves, and thus used other partners' cloud service offerings. The first was royalty share. Digital sales are growing so rapidly across so many channels with no standard way of reporting from the retailers that tracking and validating digital sales data was a real challenge for us with our volumes. Royalty share was the solution for Hachette. We brought them into trade publishing out of the music vertical over 2 years ago, and we helped to adapt their services for our needs and ultimately the industry's. The second example is Hachette's approach to combating illegal downloads and sharing of our authors' works. Piracy is a large issue in our industry. To help understand the extent and ensure we protect our authors' rights, we brought a tributor out of other media verticals about 3 years ago and applied their monitoring and reporting to trade publishing. Since then, we have used Mark Monitor, and a number of other providers have surfaced in this space, helping us all reduce the cost of these types of services. These are just two examples we can share of applying innovative solutions from other world-class providers and not trying to be all things to all people ourselves.
Now, Hachette is also, as I understand it, perhaps going to offer solutions that you developed internally to the rest of the industry. Can you tell us about any of these yet? And how do you measure the trade-off between making a solution broadly available and keeping your development internal as a competitive advantage?
Well, we modernized across the board in the last 4 years, and in some cases actually decided to build versus buy, although buy is our first preference. When we did build, we proceeded with a mindset of sharing all of our ideas, sharing specifically for the other countries within Hachette Leave, but also other distribution clients we serve, like Abrams, Chronicle, Oxmoor House, Guinness, Marvel, and Disney, to name just a few. All of our cloud services have firewalls and a modular architecture that allows us to plug into other workflows virtually any of our services while still allowing customization as needed. Look, as a Six Sigma black belt myself, I understand that the power of continuous improvement and process excellence lies in the voice of the customer to ensure that we really align to the needs of the industry. Customers for us are not just internal functions, but also clients and retail partners, and yes, other participants of the value chain in the industry. The more voices we have involved in helping us evolve our services, the more powerful the relevance to the industry and ultimately the impact becomes. So we are actually very supportive of broadening the participation where it makes sense. With that said, yes, there will absolutely be limits to what we offer as an external services. However, there are some things we're offering that have already been put in place, like our consumer digital asset distribution platform that has enabled our sister companies in France and the UK and several U.S. clients to deploy author marketing apps quickly and cheaply and efficiently to the marketplace. You will also hear at the upcoming Cloud Services Conference about a new tool we are calling Book Radar that provides price monitoring services, ensures metadata is posted correctly for titles on e-retailers, and offers digital merchandise monitoring, which, as we all know, is growing in importance as companies try to charge for digital real estate placement. There's also a retailer feedback report that will actually help us jointly improve revenue opportunities for both parties. So Book Radar ultimately allows companies to gain insight and some control of the retailer ecosystem. Finally, we are excited to have created a powerful publicity intelligence platform that provides a dynamic and an intuitive contact management system linked to a campaign management tool that will help keep the publicity, marketing, and sales departments in sync. PIP, as we affectionately call it, maximizes the publicist's resources, expands their reach and effectiveness, and I believe it will be a market-leading platform in short order. We believe these offerings will help the industry transform just as they have helped us, while allowing the power of crowds to help us home the requirements to the future evolution of these tools. We do not pretend to have all the answers for the industry. Sometimes you need all of the help of all the participants to help evolve a service for the benefit of us all. So,
I really appreciate this, and I think that the industry will too, Ken. Thanks so much for getting us started on the subject in the way that you have, and getting us started on the webinar in the way that you have.
By all means, I think it's a very important thing for companies and C-levels to pay attention to going forward.
Thank you. Big organizations have particular challenges and opportunities with hosted solutions. At our July 26th conference, we'll have a panel of big publishers talking about that, including Ken's colleague at Hachette, Ralph Munson, Rick Schwartz of HarperCollins, Chris Hart of Random House, and Yuvi Kochar of the Washington Post. Kochar will also be doing a presentation about how he distributes services from a corporate perch to companies within his group. Also, on the big publisher front, we will have a presentation from Alfredo Santana about John Wiley's implementation of CCC's RightsLink service, which automates the heretofore manual process of granting permissions. The big publishers have particularly unique problems because cloud solutions today are accessible to individuals at their desktops. One IT director told me that the number of unsanctioned IT projects in his company had gone up from 10% of the projects 5 or 6 years ago to 30% of the projects now. And this presents a real challenge to the IT departments that have really been in control of all of the software solutions that are used inside a company. Because in order to do anything, you really had to get online in their queue in order to get anything done. That's no longer the case. And you get some very, very interesting cases. One publisher told me about, for example, the fact that Dropbox is difficult for IT departments to handle, but that there are other solutions that do exactly what Dropbox does that are not. So if they can influence the way that these solutions are employed, they can make a much more seamless environment for their company. So where are we? I think what we're going to do, we have changed the program slightly from what we originally projected, and we're going to go to Ted Hill next. Hi, Mike. How's it going? It's going fine. It's going fine. Let me pull my questions out for you. Are we advancing the slides, or are we? Yeah, we're going to advance the slides. Well, we're going to have to advance the slides past Rick at the moment. We'll hope Rick will come back to us. And there's Ted. Now, Ted, you really were the one who put this subject on my radar screen more than a year ago. Mm-hmm. And what made the light bulb go on for you that this is really an important subject?
Yeah, sure, Mike. Thanks, and thanks for having me here today. You know, I spent about 20 years working in-house at a number of publishing houses, Random House, S&S, Pearson, working with some very cumbersome and antiquated systems, including something called UOS at Simon Schuster that was originally built by Martin Marietta back in the 60s, a defense company, which was still living there well into the 90s. You know, after leaving working in-house at publishers, I cut my teeth on the system side at Vista Computer Services, which, as you know, is a leading services provider of production management, ERP, inventory management. Now it's called publishing technology. And these were fantastically robust systems in-house at large publishers and small, ranging from HarperCollins and Cambridge University Press to many others. And, you know, what I realized there is I had the chance to see that putting in these systems was a very long, difficult, and expensive process. We often compared it to having a heart transplant for many of the mission-critical operations.
And it's like a heart transplant because if the system failed in the middle of the transfer, the patient might die.
That's right. If you're putting in a new inventory management system and there are hiccups in it, and inevitably there are some, but if it fails to get your inventory out the door, you're in real trouble. Since I became a consultant, I had the opportunity to work with several innovative software companies. And really specifically, I'd like to talk about NetGalley, which is a service for distributing online digital galleys. Most of the publishing industry uses it today. And also a tool called Edelweiss, which is an online catalog service for publishers to replace their print catalog, which really was a digital CRM system. And you know, I was astounded at the speed with which companies could adopt these technologies and put them in literally in a matter of weeks if they wanted to. They are very simple to use. There was very, very simple integration and touch points. And I thought to myself, why? You know, why can't more publishing systems be this way? Now, of course, there are differences between lightweight marketing applications and, you know, really intense enterprise resource management tools that tie into many different parts of your business. But the fact of the matter is that since that time back early in the millennium, we've seen hosted solutions arise for royalties management, like Royalty Share that Ken mentioned earlier, title management tools, production management, companies like Firebrand, and many, many other services. And you know what you find is that with a very, very few exceptions, perhaps in the area of financials and so forth, most mid-sized and even larger publishers can find many of the tools they need to run their business provided as a service.
Makes a lot of sense. And then, as you pointed out to me when we were first discussing this a year ago, there is sometimes a collision of interest between the IT department and the company when it comes to hosted solutions, because hosted solutions really reduce the need and the dependence on the IT department, and so that the compromises, to the extent that there are any, in using a hosted solution might look more severe to an IT person that likes having control than it might look to a CFO or a COO that would like saving some money. So I would like you to talk a little bit about what you see as the challenges of hosted solutions to large companies and then to small companies, because I really think it's quite different.
Sure. Well, let me say, first of all, that some of that resistance is well-founded. There are established practices for deploying these systems, for gathering requirements, for budgeting for them, you know, for making sure that when they go in, that they work, and that is very, very important. So, you know, you can say yes, there's resistance just because they're different, but those differences really are important, and of course they're a matter of degree depending on the solutions you use. I think that another area behind resistance for the larger departments is that it's not that you don't need the IT department so much anymore, but you might need different skill sets from them. They may be more involved in managing open APIs and working at implementing best practices and really, you know, creating awareness for the possibilities of the new tool, and also, of course, understanding them well enough to buy them, which everybody needs an informed decision when they buy any kind of software for the company. So I think for the larger publishers and the IT departments within them, the real issue is about going outside their comfort zone. Within that, I would say that it varies when you're talking about smaller publishers. I see that Richard's here. Do we?
No, we just keep going.
All right, sorry. Let me continue with my train of thought.
The smaller publishers, of course, have a different benefit because the smaller publishers are now able to use systems that would have probably been beyond their reach if they needed to host it themselves. They would have needed computers they don't have and IT departments they don't have. And
yeah, that's exactly right. And what I've seen is a great range. There's a great range of everything in publishing between the ones who are fearless on one end of the spectrum and are willing to grasp new technologies and prove their merit sort of in the field, and then the others that are very fearful and they really wait for their peers to go first and make sure that they're fully proven and tested before they go forward with them. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, they do hosted solutions and software service does a tremendous amount to level the playing field between the larger and the smaller players. The larger players, perhaps they need to go outside their comfort zone and expand into new areas, as Ken's operation has done. And for the smaller ones, it's a matter about having the confidence as well as the competence to take a step in perhaps a slightly different direction.
You know, now that we've introduced the idea that the smaller players have a different interest here, I want to bring in Rick Joyce, and we'll come back to you, Ted, at the end for some of your thoughts about how people will approach this as they put it in. Rick Joyce is the Chief Marketing Officer for Perseus, which is a company that is both a substantial publisher in its own right and a leader in offering distribution services to other publishers. So he really has a view about how the smaller publishers both can benefit from these services and what the choke points are for them and in finding and putting them in. Rick, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you could shoehorn some time out of your day to be here. I know you're already at an off-site meeting and busy, but I'm glad you showed up. Thank you.
Right, you're welcome.
Rick, your distribution services, physical through Perseus and digital through Constellation, are used by more than 300 publishers. What do you see as the benefit of hosted solutions for smaller publishers?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. One thing I would say is that, hosted solutions are sort of a subset of the issue of what do you want to, what do you want to have resident, in-house as a capability, and what do you want to import or outsource, insource or outsource. And we go back to that question a lot for ourselves and also for the publishers we serve, just to keep asking the question, what do you want to be excellent at? And when you decide, which of those parts of the, publishing process really are the ones you have to own and control, it drives, a set of decisions about what you staff and what you do in the publishing house. But it also, the flip side of it also implies, well, here are some things where we should look for excellence elsewhere because for whatever reason, technical requirements or scale requirements or resource requirements or other things, now this is not something for us to be excellent at. And so, and then the question comes, do you, how do you get it? Do you get it via a partner? Is there a software as a service solution? Is it something in between? So we really, think that's a very fundamental question for publishers of all sizes. But for the smaller publishers, one of the couple things that really jump out that we think can be provided is a couple things. One is step-level, improvements in capability or cost. Some of these software service solutions are fundamentally either more powerful or more productive than the existing processes.
So in other words, you can grow without having to worry about the step increments in technology that growth might require.
Right. I think both you can grow and also the capability itself can grow. Because one of the tough things about having a process yourself that's part people and part technology is it's not just what you have to do to deliver that function, accounting, royalty processing, whatever it is. But it's the investments you have to make to keep up if it's a capability that, is evolving or in revolution or stepping forward. And so, there are costs to keeping up with changing requirements, and there are costs to not keeping up. So one of the advantages, if you pick the right hosted solution and or partners, is you're not just getting the service delivered a certain way, but you're future-proofing at some level that function in your business, because you get the opportunity to have those capabilities stay current or move forward, because the provider has a deep interest in keeping up or staying ahead. And so we think one of the benefits of step-level improvements in capability or cost. The second is that future-proofing, ability to have the function stay on the forefront of what it can deliver. And I think the third thing is integration, which I know you're going to talk about, which is some of these things just integrate better with either other parts of the organization. There are often many disparate folks in different locations who need to touch the functionality or the data, and that ability to do that without a whole IT infrastructure can be quite attractive.
So it all makes so much sense. When you look at the services that you might decide to offer to your clients, what are the signs of something that will work well, but also be easy for a smaller organization without a big IT department to implement? What are the earmarks you look for?
Well, I think it's another very good question. There are more self-contained and simpler services, and then very complex ones. We have some outsourced or in-source solutions for things like social listening and media monitoring. Not that complicated in terms of the parts of the company it interfaces with and the data it holds. On the other hand, workflow solutions that HTML-first workflow, highly complex, touches lots of different parts of the organization, holds enormous proprietary and work in process data. And if you're a small publisher just starting to think about what do I want to be excellent at and where might I look for it, the more contained plug-and-play services are obviously a place to start. And they're not necessarily the place where you're going to drive the most value. But to your question, when we look at these kinds of services, one of the things we say is, well, what are the switching costs? How tough is this going to be to integrate? How much of a job is it to plug in this, plug-and-play service? So that's one thing we look for. Another thing we look for is the service part of software as a service. Is this just a technology solution, or is there support? Is this service something that's centric to publishers, or has it been built for some other industry and they're moonlighting or trying to move into this space without understanding what we do? Is the company and the service constantly kicking its own tires and trying to add capabilities that move it forward, or is it a static kind of offering? And I think those kinds of things that people often don't look at when they do the business case or kick the tires on these solutions end up coming back to bite you if you don't look at them. If you don't look at the service side, if you don't look how centric it is to publishing, if you don't look at their future-proofing, you end up regretting it. So those are some of the hallmarks for us when we're looking at third-party.
That's really helpful. Do you think that it's harder or easier, because you have a real view of big company and small company? Perseus itself is a pretty big company. Your clients are smaller. Do you have a view of whether it's harder or easier for smaller companies to integrate the cloud or hosted solutions they find into their overall workflow? And is this something you're able to help with as a distributor?
Well, I think the answer to the first question is it depends. I mean, it depends on the company, and it depends on what we're talking about, whether it's, as I say, royalty payments or NetGalleys or, media monitoring or whether we're talking about, something like workflow, which is quite complex. And then it also depends on the level of capability of the company we're talking about. But I think all things being equal, one of the values that we try to have and add is to do a lot of the wiring, a lot of the integration, a lot of the paving of the path, so that the smaller, vital, vibrant independent publishers can,
get value and get started fairly quickly without having enormous switching and startup costs. And one of the ways we can do that is because we have a lot of other services that we can kind of integrate it with. We can integrate with title management systems, or we can integrate with reporting, or we can integrate it with other aspects of the enterprise. So the short answer is I think it depends on the company and the function, but I do think that often a hybrid solution here where you've got a partner, but that partner is offering some of their services in an integrated way that come from third-party in the cloud, excellent companies, lets you have the advantage of kind of a big IT department that isn't yours and a nimble sort of in the cloud set of service offerings.
That's all been very helpful. I'm sure that there'll be a lot more to add on July 26th. I thank you for taking time out of what I know is a packed day for you to join us and contribute that, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on the 26th.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike.
It is easy for smaller companies to see the benefit of not needing a big IT department to have a world-class tech solution, but it isn't as easy for them to figure out what's right for them or to put it in if they don't have a company like Constellation working for them in that regard. On July 26th, in addition to Rick, we're going to hear from Michael Covington of David C. Cook, who previously led the efforts of a trade association of Christian publishers to get their members into hosted services, and from Andrea Fleck-Nesbitt of Workman, who has an interesting case study in which Workman has helped a publisher actually smaller than they are turn that company's title management system into a hosted service that Workman can use. Then Andrea and Michael will join Patricia Gallagher of the Liberty Fund and Bonnie Russell of Wayne State University Press, both of which have just installed cloud solutions, on a panel discussing the hosted services from the small company point of view. Now, John Wicker, are you out there?
I am indeed, Michael.
Oh, you're there. Good. We're glad to hear you there because we want to put you up next. John is the publishing segment head of the global consulting practice for TCS, Tata Consulting Services. John, you told me a couple of years ago that you thought publishers would have to cut their overheads and systems costs in half or more during this decade. What makes you say that?
Well, first of all, thanks, Mike, and thanks for inviting me on the call today. I'd like to add one word to that statement and actually use it twice. I think what I meant to say, is publishers have to cut their legacy overheads. That's the new word, legacy overheads and legacy systems costs in half or more during this decade. And that's because many of their legacy costs, a couple of obvious examples are warehousing and galley printing, will at some point go away completely. And I haven't been paid to give this plug to Rick, but I will tell you that anybody that isn't really good at warehousing ought to start talking to Rick or some of the other people out there that provide these services, because if it's not a really core competency for you, it's a huge distraction. So I'd highly recommend.
John, I remember 10 or 15 years ago on a project we were working on together, calling things parity functions. And if I remember, a parity function is something where you can't really gain great competitive advantage by doing it well, but you can destroy yourself if you don't do it well. And we identified parity functions as the kind of thing that publishers really ought to lay off on experts. And I think that's what you're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's, to be very candid, IT systems and services, and I appreciate I have a vested interest in that, are another one. I mean, one of the problems that most publishers are facing and will continue to face is that their systems cannot support the products that they would like to sell, or more importantly, that their customers would like to buy. So you have a situation where as the publisher becomes more digital, as the consumers want more digital products, you have more fragments, more bundles, more complex contracts, rights, royalties, all those sorts of things. And these are going to become increasingly important as customers move from a business to business relationship to a business to consumer relationship. And I'm not suggesting that schools won't still be the major influencer of purchases for educational books, or the bookstores are going to go away, but you're going to see more individual consumers buying books, and the ability of a publisher to really understand that marketplace and implement systems that allow them to deal with that marketplace is going to become absolutely crucial in the future. So back to your original question, yes, publishers have to cut their legacy costs and overheads and their legacy systems costs in half or more during this decade, or they're going to get into really serious trouble, in my humble opinion.
Why do you think, John, that hosted solutions are so important to that overhead reduction you're saying that they have to make?
Well, I think Ken actually identified some of them, but I would say, simply stated, it's the capability of some of these systems, the flexibility, scalability, and if done properly, cost. I mean, at least, if you go to a hosted solution, you're swapping out CapEx costs for operational expense, and that can be a huge difference. I mean, I think Ted mentioned before, the cost of implementing new systems, particularly for smaller customers, but even for larger ones. I mean, we can be talking tens of millions of dollars here, capital expenditure, and it's a frightening number, and there's lots of war stories, and some people do it a lot better than others. But if you can avoid that and do it on an OpEx basis, I think you're going to be a lot better off. And
what I think what's coming to me as you were saying this, as you're explaining all of this, is Ken really stressed the fact that the hosted systems allowed you to grow and keep improving without investment. But what I'm getting from you is that they also allow you to shrink without investment. And so, and without having to dispose of investments. And that could be just as important.
Well, particularly since, that's absolutely right, Mike. I mean, particularly if you look at what is currently happening, and I don't mean to sound like a prophet of doom, revenues overall will likely shrink, because it is probably true that the e-book, which is at the moment at least less expensive because there's less cost, there's no printing, warehousing, shipping. The e-book is a smaller sale number for the publisher. So the more you get of them, the harder it's going to be for publishers to maintain their revenues. Good news is it doesn't mean they won't be able to maintain their profits. In fact, some publishers, they become more and more digital, are in fact experiencing more and more profit. So, it's a balance, but you do have to be conscious of the fact that, your business may go either way, and you may choose to move some people to different locations. I mean, outsourcing obviously is a subject that needs to be looked at, but it may not be outsourcing to offshore locations. It may be what some people call inshoring or nearshoring, meaning it's a lot easier and cheaper, certainly a lot cheaper to operate your customer service center in Omaha, Nebraska than it is in Manhattan. So these are all issues that people need to look at pretty carefully, as well as the when they're managing their whole cost and profit picture.
John, what are you seeing? Are you seeing people embracing these changes? Do you see any particular characteristics in the organizations that resist them? Are there anything you've seen that would tell an executive that his company's systems thinking is not what it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like everything, you get a range of responses. Some people act like kind of deer in the headlights, not sure what they want to do, not sure where they can go to for help. And I think the conference is an ideal opportunity for people in that position to listen to some experts, listen to people who've had the experience of going down this road, and really try and think through how they should plan their digital future. But I think if you other executives, and I'll use Ken Michaels as an example, and if you're still on the call, Ken, you owe me a beer for this, but Ken really kind of gets it, right? I mean, he gets the fact that the world is changing, the publishing business is changing, you need to be flexible, you need to be scalable, you need to be able to properly manage your budgets and everything else. And people like that are really looking at some innovative ways of developing systems, deploying systems, putting people in place, as chief digital transformation officers, what have you. So I mean, there are many companies out there that are really conscious of this, particularly the big ones, but there's also a lot of companies that are sadly probably going to get run over as the technology evolution progresses.
John, thank you so much for your time today. That was John Wicker of TCS. TCS is a platinum sponsor of the Publishing in the Cloud Conference, which means that they're joining our two global sponsors, Perseus Constellation and Copyright Clearance Center. They and our event sponsors for that conference, Firebrand Technologies, IBM, and their partner Co-Enterprise, Flowtech and Virtue Sales, as well as the expert speakers that we're going to have, are all going to be available doing a 2-hour conversation with the experts portion of the program. And the reason that we do this is because we know that everybody who attends has specific questions that they want to address, and sometimes it's not particularly useful to stand up in a crowd of 150 people from the audience and try to ask that question and get it answered in the way you need. So what we did is created this 2-hour session where our experts and sponsors will be at tables and easily accessible to the audience. And so to wrap this up, I want to come back to Ted Hill because I know Ted is going to, at our session, he's going to give us a pretty complete rundown of SaaS offerings, including a checklist of what to look for when you're shopping for a service. So Ted, can you give us a quick preview of that now?
Yeah, sure, Mike. I'd just like to restate how important it is, as you just said, to talk to service providers, because the fact of the matter is your checklist will vary depending on the kind of system that you're looking at adopting. The kinds of things that you may need to do if you're putting in a relatively lightweight tool like Dropbox or NetGalley or something like that is very different than if you're putting in something that is a lot more deeply embedded in your business. And
like a title management system.
Like a title management system, right. That's not a...
And everybody needs one.
Every publisher needs one. I don't personally need one. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you what their requirements are very specifically for their own solution, what the integration points are, and so forth. But just to give you some highlights of sort of the broader checklist, I did a panel on this very topic, a publisher's checklist for using cloud services, at the recent Book Expo in New York. And we had a number of service providers talking about their own personal checklists. And I've gone through what they said, and I put them into two buckets. The first one goes to Socrates, I guess, who said, know thyself. And really a publisher needs to make sure they've got their own house in order. Do you have your content organized? Do you have it in a place where you can get access to it, and where you can draw on it and share it with others? This is obviously very important if you're using a digital asset management or distribution service, or for any kind of service that involves transforming your content or sharing it in some way. You also have to make sure that your data is in a state where you can share it with service providers. You have to have clean metadata, and you have to have the ability to transmit it and to update it for any service where it might be associated with your product. You also have to look at, do you have the skill sets that you need to both evaluate these systems and then to teach others to use them and to get the most out of them over time. So that's really, sort of the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you're able to take advantage of systems, because you may not be able to customize them and adapt them to the various quirks of your own legacy system.
So you may need to adapt your own workflows and business practices to accommodate the systems, and that's one of the things you need to think about.
Well, that is something that is, I put it in another bucket, which is, do you have the mindset where you can take advantage of these things? Are you willing to keep it simple, if at all possible? Are you willing to look at what are the existing best practices for using this tool and thinking about how can that be applied to your organization? Is there something you can do simply with the tool that you may have done in a more complicated fashion traditionally? And one great way to start is with a simple project or something small. And the beauty of these systems is that many of them don't involve a high upfront investment or any significant investment at all. And you can, in fact, start small with them. And then once you've got them, look at whether you are able to see what others are doing and basically run with the crowd on shared platform. It's a very different experience from just developing expertise in the thing that only you know well.
Ted, thanks very much. Thanks to everybody who participated today and then all of you who tuned in. Remember that we're doing a full day on this on July 26th. We have an offer of $150 off the conference price, which will be valid through Friday. One more time, I'd like to say thanks to our global sponsors, Constellation and Copyright Clearance Center, to our Platinum event sponsor, TCS, and to our event sponsors, Firebrand Technologies, IBM and their partner Co-Enterprise, Clovertech, and Virtue Sales. And I hope to see many of you, if not all of you, at the seminar on July 26th. The registration information is up on the screen, and we'll see you all then. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks very much.